A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. I am boasting Amofaye with our Rice Exchange as a number of frontier African markets are on a Muslim holiday for today, and others such as Nigeria will extend until tomorrow, while Egypt will be on holiday until later in the week. We thank you for joining us. So let's get started on this note. The United Nations Global Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, last week reported that food prices were lower in the month of June, the third consecutive of a 3 months decline. However, the specter of increased prices of food and other agricultural products due to supply chain constraints are not over yet. For highly populated economies such as Nigeria, there is a trilemma of rising food and fuel prices and acute shortage of electricity. My guest on the show tonight is discussing the economics of these three important elements. Welcome, Professor Ken Ife, our development economist, live from our Abuja studios. It's great to have you on the show tonight, Professor. Thanks for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate your time and hope you enjoy your holiday. Let's get started on this latest report by the Food and Agriculture Organization, which shows that food prices are trending lower globally for the third month in a row. Why is it different in Nigeria?
Well, it could only trend down if, one, Russia has relaxed and then food is beginning to come out from Ukraine. Wheat and the others. The second one is that maybe some big countries are releasing their strategic reserves to cushion the effect. Thirdly, countries are beginning to also restrain their exports and then invest more on production, agricultural production. So you can see the three can act interactively. But in the case of Nigeria, we have very, very peculiar element here, because one is that our food supply system is hostage to pervasive insecurity across the whole regions, all the regions. And secondly, we have over 100 million neighboring countries feeding on Nigeria. And their food they're buying from us are very, very cheap, because there's a differential in the currency, about 60% differential in the currency, our currency and their franc CFA. So our food still remain extremely attractive to them. And we cannot compete, actually, because there's a high cost of transportation. Transporting food in the middle belt and in the north down to the south. Very, very expensive transportation system. So those are some of the constraints that are going on that, in the agricultural system. And then finally, we are now in planting season now. We are in planting season, so most of our crops are in the ground. So this is the worst time in terms of food supply for Nigeria. Seasonal.
In terms of agriculture, food sustainability policy, do we have one? And if yes, what is it?
No, we do have. Ministry of Agriculture have their own program. But I could tell you that from 2017, Central Bank waded into this and created a multiplicity of programs led by their Anchor Borrowers program, which is very successful. But people will always want to have a bash on it. And it's got 5 million farmers with loan without collateral. And they're producing over 5 million hectares of land, maize and rice and a lot, about 15 different produce right now. So that's successful. And then there's now an extension of that program to 100 for 100 PPP, which is the processing side. And then there's an export program, which is the RT to $200 billion export. So there's a continuum, in a continuum of that policy.
My question, if I go back a bit on that question, Prof, is in terms of our food policy. Again, you spoke about neighboring countries. Nigeria is bordered by about 6 to 8 countries, and you talk about roughly 100 million people. So if you add that to 200 million, here, we're talking about 300 million, as it were, and majority of these other countries have quite to the Lake Chad region to the east, and if you look a little bit to the western parts, the Sokoto, other part of the country in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and others. So when you look at the map of Nigeria, with the exception of perhaps Cameroon and a few others down south, so why are we producing so much and our food being bought cheaply? So if we have a food sustainability policy on the ground that we need to feed ourselves first and at a price that are affordable to Nigerians, why are we having so much leakages?
No, it doesn't work like that. Under the ECOWAS Treaty, we signed up many years ago to a free, what do you call it, duty-free, what we call it free movement of goods, services, capital, right of establishment, and there's no tax or duty on primary produce. That's the raw garri, raw rice, all this stuff, no duty whatsoever, no quota on them. So it's just a free market, but it's only when you do value addition that you can be subject to tax unless you register for ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme, which is called ETLS. That's where you get a tax exemption. But you must satisfy the rule of origin, which means you must show that at least there's 30% value addition minimum. So that's that. So, but the thing is that those food are moving across the border and they're not settling us with dollars. So you don't even see them coming in as dollars. So they're using Nigerian currency to buy these things and all of that. And there's not much you can do. Now we've gone into Africa Continental Free Trade, which means the trade will go on with other countries in Africa. So Cameroon will benefit because we are part of AFCTA and other Central African countries. So it's not a situation that you can help, except that and then the thing is this, why is a problem for us, is that in the far north, in the frontier north, where most of these countries are, they are in arid region. Those countries are in arid region, so they are not actually doing well in production, food production. And then their currency has an advantage over our currency. About 6 years ago, 1 naira will buy 3 francs CFA. Today is only 1, can only buy 1, which is like 60% devaluation. So to them, our food are very cheap. So they are buying our food, drying it and selling it back to us and exporting it. Our food program, World Food Program will go there and buy the food from there. And if you now have to compete by bringing down the food down to the south, that's where you are hit with high transportation costs. Because it costs about 100,000 naira to move 1 metric ton of grain from Sokoto down to Lagos or to Port Harcourt. It is so expensive. And it's going up every day because of the cost of diesel.
Okay, so we need to rethink our food policy, don't we?
No, what we could do is, I have always said this, we have to have cottage level processing, world level processing. Because if you can process right at the spot where you are producing the food, then you are now, is value addition. Then that now becomes eligible to tax. Do you understand what I'm saying? And then you want to add value. Take, for example, cassava. 70% of cassava is water. So why are you going to be transporting it? The cost of transporting it just outweighs the benefit. But if people have small machines at cottage level, at world level, and they can actually dry the crop, blend, whatever they can do there to add value, then it's a different ball game altogether. Okay, so they are now selling processed food.
So in terms, so we're moving from agriculture or just pure farming to agro-allied, which is what you're talking about, cooperatives and all of that, and getting cottage industries open. So do we need to rethink another program aside the Anchor Borrowers program that will focus on this very small, light machinery and others that are needed to do what you call this mid-level, midstream agro-product processing?
Absolutely. I know that there has been talks of crop processing zones and all of that, but I remember about 3-4 years ago, I tried to persuade the government to do the program done by UNDP, which is called Multifunctional Platform. What they did is that in many of the West Africa states, about 10 of them, they supported between 5,000 to 10,000, 13,000 communities by giving them a steel platform with 3 or 4 grinders and all kinds of things, milling machines and all that. And they're using solar to support to give it the power. So I tried to get them to do 10,000 for us so that we have 10,000 watts and we can have 1 in each ward. And I tried my best, but the bureaucracy just couldn't push those through. So I just gave up on that. But that's the kind of program that you need. because power is a challenge.
Yes, so we're going to talk about power now, but let's talk about fuel a little bit because subsidy will most likely remain in place until June next year. Do you think any new administration can remove this major distortion in our system?
No, I think the big mistake we are making is that we are looking at bang, remove the subsidy. That's not going to work. It's going to result in political violence and social upheaval. What we need is that multiple approaches, there's a multiplicity of approaches that have to take place at the same time. For example, we have gone into gas transition program in Nigeria. If we are now on gas transition, why doesn't government put some money to change or retool all these trucks, tankers, change them to gas, let them use gas instead of diesel. Gas will be cheaper. And then government can subsidize gas because you can now know that those gas are going to be used to power our generators, and they are going to use them for transportations and all these buses and trucks. They all move to gas. When they move to gas, they will reduce completely the demand for diesel, and then also reduce some of the demand for PMS. Then that's one way. We can also manage the supply side. NNPC is getting 200 billion from federal government injection. If they take 50 billion of that money and put 10 billion in 5 local modular refineries, invest only 10 billion, they will get 20 times 5, 100,000 barrels to be produced, because they have to involve them, because they can guarantee them, so they can guarantee them crude, and then they can offtake. So in that way, these guys will fly. But to think that you are going to wait until you get $2-3 billion and go and sink them into that hole called old antiquated refineries, it's just another long story, a deep hole. And if only that they will invest in some of these modular refineries, each one costs about $40 billion, $30 to $40 billion, then you can get traction. And many of them will they'll start absorbing some of the workers. NNPC is paying salary for not doing anything in the refineries. Then, of course, there are other areas too. You can also license some of the foreign companies, countries surrounding us. All these French countries you mentioned now. If they get modular refineries themselves and will guarantee them gas, guarantee them crude, then they will stop buying our crude, because at the moment we are subsidizing the PMS being sent to them. So, these are strategies to open up the space. And thirdly, NNPC should never have a monopoly of buying and selling crude. Okay, so there's no monopoly that works anywhere in the world. So they have to open this business up so that you can get more efficient.
Professor Kenife, NNPC says it's going to go fully commercial next week, Tuesday, July the 19th. So I'm going to ask you after the break to give me your thoughts on that and what to be expected. We'll be right back, everyone. Stand by. This is your Rise Exchange. The two largest economies in sub-Saharan Africa are currently facing acute power shortage in Nigeria and South Africa. Today, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says in his weekly newsletter that his government is consulting on measures to tackle the country's power outages and will announce a comprehensive set of actions in the coming days. Last week, the Nigerian government announced the takeover of 5 of the country's 11 power distribution companies. It also paid $100 million as part of its counterpart funding under the Siemens $2.3 billion presidential power program. Let's get back on our conversation with Professor Ken Ife in our Abuja studios. Professor, before we go to the power sector, the NNPC says it's going fully commercial next week on July the 19th. What's your take on that?
Well, that's the good news. It was expected to have done that a few months ago. But the thing is that it now needs to take commercial decisions. And first of all, is go and find out the value of your assets. They have to go and value their assets and decide which ones have outlived their usefulness and which ones have to be getting rid of. You cannot justify having 4 refineries moribund and then paying salaries of all the staff and then producing no fuel. That's not a commercial decision. So they have to do something. But you've got to begin by establishing the value of your assets, which is what Saudi Aramco did. And then from there, they took off. And look at their shares now. Their value is $2.3 trillion dollars, the highest in the world. Now, the second thing is that they cannot expect to be a monopoly in terms of exclusive supply of crude and exclusive purchase of PMA. It's not going to fly because you're not a private company. So what they should be looking at is you are going to be capitalized, quite all right. You've only got 200 billion now coming, but there will be more money coming to you. And yeah, you can now borrow even more. You're able to borrow 5 billion from Afrexim Bank. Look at this equation. If you, rather than spend $2 billion trying to repair 1 or 2 refineries, just even $500 million, 500 alone can give you how many? About 10 modular refineries. So it's better for you to invest, even if it is 20% in 10 modular refineries, and then guarantee them supply of crude, and then offtake their stuff, and they will absorb a lot of your staff that are lying around, they are paying salaries for. So, and then you win-win for you. And then open up the supply and purchase of crude. You can't have monopoly. A monopoly is not good for any country. There's nowhere monopoly is good. It conceals a lot of transparency. It breeds corruption. So you have to open that field up. It has to be opened up. That are some of my advice to them. They have to think like commercial businesses right now. And then, of course, be thinking about how soon you are going to go to the capital market to quote this company once the value is known. I reckon that they are not less than 50 trillion naira. So they should be heading out to the market as soon as possible to sell about 20 or 30% of that share.
The Nigeria's energy conundrum is continuing. Electricity, the federal government last week paid $100 million of its counterpart funding under the deal with the Siemens. Is this an indication that the country is on track to bring power to the people?
Well, I think it is, but I think it's all still coming a bit later on. I don't know whether the finances is dragging because I have thought that by now they would have sorted out the transmission and they now head down to distribution. But be it as it may, at least we now know that some distribution companies are being taken over. But they're not okay. If they have finished the transmission, we wouldn't be having all this collapse. You know, we'll be having complete system collapse. How many times in 1 month? So the sooner that they use this money to sort that out and then move to the level of distribution. And I'm sure some of the meters are coming out anyway. So that would help.
Do you think we need more private
and then
sector?
Also
do you think we need more private sector participation in the power sector? And where?
Absolutely. But what happened is this. We have private sector participating. But what happened is that the technical capacity was in question, as well as deep pockets, financial capability are in question. Those are the two critical that would make it. Because if you have a deep pocket, and from day one, you took over the distribution, the first thing that you do is to buy meters and supply it to all your network. From 2010, so you actually start collecting the correct
power
money.
Companies, some of these power distribution companies are now looking insolvent. Perhaps you saw the problem with Yola, perhaps because that was because of the insurgency in the northeast. But again, if you look at Port Harcourt, by the way, Nigeria is 200 million people. We have a very good market for any power company in the world, from Georgia to Russia, Ukraine, whatever, Germany, to come here. So why is that difficult for us?
Well, why it's difficult is this. Because I remember when they were doing this, I remember that I advised that if you are collecting $3 billion from these companies, these are private companies, for 49% of the share, rather than squander that money, paying it out to workers, let that money, put that money and ask them to borrow against it and double the size of the network. Because many of the turbines are 4 and only 1 is working. So if they took back that 3 billion, they would have been producing over 10,000 megawatts. So and then go and borrow money from central bank to pay off the workers.
So there was a problem. So there was a problem. There was a problem with that privatization we did in 2013.
That's correct. That's correct. It was wrongly conceived because if you are telling somebody, because what I said is this. If you tell them to go and borrow more money to invest in the network, it will collapse because they will not borrow any more money. For them to pay for that 49%, they had to borrow, put all their assets on the line. Now you're asking them to go and borrow again to invest in the network. It's not going to work. The next thing that they will start stripping your assets, and then they will, so that's the main reason. I couldn't see the sense in taking that money and then you share it out to workers, and then you tell the same investors to go and borrow more. That doesn't make sense. They reinvest that money. After all, if the money moves, if they borrowed back your 3 billion, then would mean that the overall size of the business is no longer 3 billion but 6 billion. So the government actually doubles their interest. So the profit coming is what they will now use to settle, pay their loan for settling the workers. But that didn't go down with Jonathan when he was there. But that's where we ended.
So where should we be going from where we are right now?
I think we need to get, well, first of all, is great news. No, see, the likes of Siemens and the GE, General Electric, they have deep pockets and they have technical capacity. So they can help and work with the ones that they can work with. While we put a lot more resources on the gas transformation, we have to get gas into this system. As we have already promised, the gas transition program is being funded. We have to go on that. The renewable energy have to go in. We have to bring power to the mass market by making sure we incentivize a lot of people using solar. And if that happens, then you see a sea change. Everybody is coming on the same grid. All the rural areas, everybody coming on the same grid. It doesn't work. And we shouldn't be working only on one single national grid. The Power Reform Act should allow local players to supply power to themselves. And then if they have surplus, they can send it to the grid.
So we need to review that law. So we need to review that law.
Well, we have. They've actually reviewed it from the 2005. Is reviewed about some years ago from an eligible buyer. They moved from 1 megawatt domicilialization to eligible power, and then now they've opened it up now.
Yes, to state governments. But if it's opened up on paper, we haven't seen it. It doesn't seem to work.
Well, it takes time. I think it does take time, but there are so many balls in the air right now.
Let's leave it there for tonight. Thank you so much. Public policy analyst and a development economist, Professor Ken Ife. We thank you so much for your analysis and views. Enjoy the rest of your evening.